If you knew anything about MPT, or if you knew anything about me specifically, you would have not sent me these books. If you were in this content space doing this thing, you wouldn't have sent me these books. But now we're here, and it's time for me to talk about an AI-generated tabletop RPG. Introducing Katana Ra by Jay Parker and Works Games. It is a book you read. When this item showed up at my doorstep, I didn't really know what I was expecting, but it turned out to basically be this long-winded investigation into who would make such a strange thing. I was there in my store, and a local podcast, Dungeons in the Attic, my boy Steve, popped by, and we were exploring the pages of this tome, and we're discussing how egregious it was. As we sat there thumbing through the book, Steve kept pointing out the issues with the art, and when I explained the mechanics of a roll, well, he became even more confused. These books are loaded with mismatched mid-journey artwork from dubious creators whose names basically eluded us. Steve is a seasoned player of tabletop games, which is why I ran the game by him. I wanted another fellow avid TTRPG gamer's take on it. Needless to say, we were very confused and couldn't put two and two together. Now, as Steve left, it was just me and the book, a little homunculus sitting on my desk masquerading as a cyberpunk game. So I opened it up and I began to take notes. I began Googling the creators behind Katana Ra, and it sent me down a cyberpunk dystopian level rabbit hole. So let me get on my soapbox a little bit for this review this book, and tackle an issue that I've wanted to tackle in an MPT video for a long time. It's time to talk about AI. Alright, so this is a very complicated book. Katana Ra has a lot of Cyberpunk Red and Shadowrun in its world. When introduced to a new setting or a setting book, starting with a brief overview of what you can expect to explore in these pages is actually really important. It's actually so vitally important for the onboarding process of a new TTRPG, mainly because that is kind of helping to sell the tone and setting of your book, right? People like good mechanics, but people are often sold on vibes. I know, an egregious word to use in today's day and age, but I mean, it's why a lot of the most famous RPGs are what they are, which is where this book really falls apart, because despite claiming to be made by people who know the industry, this book defies pretty much every single convention possible. The book and the lore, the prose within it, is the epitome of putting the cart before the horse. It's dysfunctional from its table of contents to its lack of index, and any attempt to target a new gamer, as CEO Kaz has discussed, is a half-hearted corporate speak if I've ever heard one.
As always, every game we build has got an easy introduction mode, like a lightweight mode for those who want to get started just by pick up and play. This is no exception. Katana Ra has that also. But it has also got enormous amounts of complexity and depth in the rule set if you want to start digging into creating your custom rules and your custom settings based on it.
So basically you're saying there's a Jonathan introductory level, and then there's a Jay Parker advanced level for those who are... Okay.
Yes, everything that we do has got an, because we noticed when we built our first video game that we were not only attracting new gamers to our world, we were attracting a generation of people who had never played games before.
Wow.
So,
now, what I mean by it breaking every convention is pretty simple. Every rule book that I've ever seen, the D&D PHB gives an overview, Call of Cthulhu's Keeper's rulebook gives an overview, Heckna campaign setting, Fool's Gold campaign setting. I could go on, but I'm just using things that are in front of me right now. But essentially, you know what you're getting into by the bottom of page 3. You know what the pitch is. Housekeeping is really just so you can get to the good stuff. It's to show the player exactly what we're going to be doing here. Especially because these books are kind of going to end up being aimed more towards dungeon masters. Katana Ra lacks the background or pedigree to skip the boring stuff. In fact, The complexity of this world actually demands that you explain a lot of the core concepts before we get into the specifics of the world itself. I mean, even with prose-heavy tomes like Vampire the Masquerade, the key important stuff of the universe is clearly marked in a table of contents, allowing me to skip the vampire fan fiction and get right into understanding the universe and the things that are important for understanding what a game like this would be like, what kind of world and mindset that I'm gonna be in when I open these pages and see mutants next to robots, next to kaiju, next to everything. I think this is really exemplified by when I opened a book, the first thing I see is a really long list of vaguely worded Asian sounding words. In what I can only describe as like an Excel sheet before diving into like a verbose, overly specific calendar. I don't even know what the world is or what kind of world or anything about it. And the game is showering me with meaningless gaijin babble, if I had to call it anything. The moment-to-moment experience of this book as both a GM and a player is complicated and convoluted and almost fighting you at every single page that you turn. It's ridiculous. For example, I turn a page and then with no preamble or any explanation, the world has mutants and mutations. Okay, so I guess that adds something to the mechanics. Before going on, I read another page and it says, oh, well, this game also has kaiju. It has Godzilla-like large monsters. And it also has mecha, like Pacific Rim or Gundam. And there's demons in this universe. And there's space travel. It's like a Las Vegas-style buffet of anime tropes. Lore-wise, after reading way too much than I'd care to admit, this is like the TTRPG version of Jump Force, if you remember that game. It's Jujutsu Kaisen, Cyberpunk Edge Runners, and Pacific Rim all mashed together in a blender until it all turns into gray goo. If there is a cool thing about anime, oh, you bet your bottom dollar it's here, but like kinda and half-heartedly and not the full way. Just the like, malign stereotypes you associate with that genre of anime. Like a Japanese blade from the future that folds 1,000 times. You've heard it. So some of the other cyberpunk themed games that exist. Shadowrun, for example. Shadowrun explores all these themes of mysticism, capitalist authoritarianism, and wealth disparity, but it uses the tropes of fantasy to kickstart or punch those concepts into overdrive, complete with dragon presidents. And it does this all with a wink, informing you all you need to know. The world is wacky, but we have something to say about wealth disparity. Something going on there. Cyberpunk Red, which the designer and writer Jay Parker worked on, does a similar thing. It makes scathing critiques of the capitalist system by mechanically introducing concepts like brand-sponsored cyberware, commercializing gender-affirming care. Still, it critiques all of these things and says something about why shredding this punk rock screw the establishment mentality that grinds against the oppressive beauty of Night City might just be futile. The point is, Cyberpunk done well says something. It says a lot about our modern day and age, increasingly so. The line at the heart of Cyberpunk is, quote, "Cyberpunk isn't about saving humanity, it's about saving yourself." I'm sure we've all heard this idiom attributed to Mike Pondsmith. There are countless ways I could wax poetic about how William Gibson's Sprawl trilogy defined a vocabulary for the genre, as well as the countless tropes, or I could touch on how the introspection in Ghost in a Shell is often a great jumping off point for the ideas of identity, the self, and consciousness. To be clear, not all cyberpunk characters or fiction is piloted by these street-level samurais like Case from Neuromancer. Some of the most outstanding cyberpunk fiction features major characters in corporate roles. Mr. Robot, Deus Ex, Market Forces, which is very slept on. I mean, the Major herself is a cop, and she's not alone in that company with the likes of Judge Dredd, Kei, Akane Susamori, and Noah Izumi. I'm gonna butcher a lot of Japanese in this review, sorry. Depending on how far we stretch the edition, heck, even characters like Shodan, who is a major POV character, can even be considered cyberpunk fiction. The most recent big release of Cyberpunk 2077 did star a street samurai. It starred V. But if you read the comics, you learn there's a variety to the horror that exists in the humdrum work for Night City. The point is, I know Cyberpunk. I consider myself to be a bit of an avid fan of the genre, even before its Renaissance resurgence with 2077. But here's the thing with Cyberpunk, right? Cyberpunk becomes very kitsch. It becomes a pastiche of itself. It ends up becoming the hand of the corpo who pretends to be like the rest of us if it has nothing to say. It just becomes corpo when they try to be like the rest of us. Cyberpunk is not a cyber truck, and that's really important to understand about the genre. If anything, that is the sign of a cyberpunk villain. Point being, I think that this lacks cohesion in the lore, and it's exemplified in the art. It's the proverbial Cybertruck in this metaphor. But that is a bridge we'll cross when we get there. As for the world of Katana Ra, I find it lacking in vibrance or any kind of statement, really. It simply doesn't say anything about anything. It makes claims to tackle a divide between tradition and modernity, but it doesn't. It feels as an afterthought as the mechanics are explored later in the book, putting demons and kaiju and cyborgs in the world for not really any strong reason, but just because others do it, and, well, anime's like, cool now, guys.
A vibrant and dynamic world where the old and the new are side by side. Tradition and ritual, modernism and futurism often mixing angrily and reluctantly. The threat of violence and death is your companion in both open field and city life. The Katana Ra role-playing game is a unique composition of the cyberpunk genre.
It's messy, it's all over the place, and I would have wished that they just kind of narrowed it down on the key themes that they wanted to tackle on, rather than just doing literally everything. I think one of the more egregious parts of this is the cost. I'll keep it short. The book is $49.99, or at least when I wrote this, it was $49.99 on TTRPG. Since then, it's gone on sale for $24.99, and assumedly it'll change again. The cost is still too high because of the AI art. There's really no reason for it to cost what it does. Cyberpunk Red is $30 USD. Shadowrun 6th is $20 USD, and frequently ends up in Humble Bundle sales. From a purely financial standpoint, you could technically spend $80 on this Katana Ra bundle, currently on sale at time of writing, which includes the core rules, Nexus Archive, which is a book of items, spells, and NPCs, and a world book, which contains critical errata and an appendix missing from the core rulebook. Upon reviewing the table of contents, I am also now aware that the setting not just has space travel, but also has aliens from outer space. Anyway, you could do that, or you could build your own bundle of PDFs for Shadowrun and get double the content as well as novels to read in a system that people actually play. But what is the system? I mean, Jay Parker is Cyberpunk Red alum. We're talking a guy who helped make Black Chrome. A lot of the stuff Jay Parker worked on for Cyberpunk Red, I use literally every week. So how are the mechanics?
The combat is relatively fast, and there's quite a lot to consider in the rule set as a whole, because character creation is relatively complex.
Okay.
And character progression is also quite complex, to a degree where I myself have not delved deeply into the rules beyond making the structurally was correct. Jay did a very in-depth deep dive into this.
Oh, man, you're telling me, Works Games CEO Kaz? Perhaps you should have delved deeper into it though, because it appears someone forgot to include some important stuff for character progression. Actually, one of the most important things, a character sheet. Yes, this is a rule book, a core rule book that lacks a character sheet. I'm serious. All right, so I can't photocopy it. Let me just go online and download it. And ooh, that is ugly and also gonna use up too much color ink. I guess I'll use an Excel sheet. I'm glad I needed to go digging for that, by the way. It brought me to their website. The sheer insanity with the layout in this book is honestly its biggest mistake. I cannot tell you guys how infuriating it is. Followed only by the befuddling just mismanagement and magic of making a character. So it has a list of things to do, which we like lists. It helps us make things easier. But that gets a little hard, and let me explain. Okay, so in order to make a character, I need to pick a shokugyo, parentheses, profession. Okay, so I pick a shokugyo, and I picked the Gunslinger since it was the first one and I'm struggling here. Nice, it's a hired gun character. It could work as a keisatsu, parentheses police officer. I could patrol the streets as a buryakudan, parentheses gangster. I could work with the yakuza, parentheses criminals. Or I could find employment with the hanzayo, parentheses crime king. Look, man, I know you got a Japanese to English thesaurus, but could you save it for the anime club? It's kind of making this reading experience a little hard. This is one of the only times I've ever needed to keep a notebook of important phrases with me while I'm making a character. Okay, so whatever. What are my gunslinger stats, okay? All right, so I have an 8 in Taikaku. Choryoku? Seisen? Okay, buddy. I get it. You like Japan. You're the place Japan Wojak. You're that meme, okay? I'm American, okay? I'm lucky I know English. Beyond that, the real big issue is that I literally don't know what any of this means. It's Japanese, and I don't speak Japanese. So you can attribute these terms to literally anything. If I weren't a seasoned tabletop gamer, I'd be lost, but you can make an educated guess based on genre conventions, and I'll save you all the work here. The stats basically equate to this: physique, intelligence, spirit, health, humanity, reputation, and AC, armor class. Though armor class is kind of like an armor class / evasion thing. The explanations for these attributes are after the classes. I need to know what the mechanics are before we give me options and throw terms at me. This book needs to be designed with newer gamers in mind. You can't assume they'll suss it out like I did. The D&D PHB 2014 has a how to play section that clearly explains the base mechanics and building the character. Call of Cthulhu has a long walkthrough of the mechanics and a short one with diagram. And it's like a really good diagram, by the way. I've used it in public games. The best thing the player's handbook does with character creation is use that time to clearly state the core abilities are this, and you can learn more about them here with clear language. It's important to reference those other pages, so if I'm a DM, I could go to the relevant information and find it very easily. There is a 12-page breakup from the start and stop of character generation steps. So I need to flip back and forth, which when we reach the end and finally get to the stats, that's when they're explained. So, how does stat generation work in Katana Ra? Well, it works pretty simply. Sorta, kinda. As simple as this game gets. A profession has base stats and substats. A substat can never exceed the base stat. My Taikaku is 8, which means none of my substats can exceed 8. I also have my highest substat be agility. The substats are listed with the explanations of the stats, and for Taikaku, it is the base stat that governs agility, constitution, and strength. This is all fine, by the way. I don't mind this at all. Cyberpunk Red has something pretty similar. I split my Taikaku between agility and strength, dumping constitution. You do this for each one, then here's where things make me laugh a bit. Your spirit, aka your seishin, is multiplied by 2. My seishin is 4, so we get an 8. That 8 is my kokoro, which means heart, by the way. Get it? Get it? It's the Japanese word for heart. Your kokoro is a depleting resource that you expend when you get augments, which is kind of like humanity in Cyberpunk Red. All characters start with a hyoban of 0, whatever that means. I think it's the reputation. And you choose a way of, which the game describes as alignment, but it's always in flux. Which frankly, alignment should have been left out of this game, in my opinion. The game seems very unrelated to it, like it's in here because someone thought Way of the Samurai seemed cool as a sentence. Your starting gear comes with your profession. And lastly, the last step is to finish the rest of the owl, which is where I lost my mind, honestly. No, seriously, step 11 says wrapping up loose numbers, which is just so funny because it's like me in math class when I say Susie drives a 3-centimeter wide car to work. Like, man, you gotta be kidding me. This is actually all really important numbers that you're tying together. Step 11 is where you calculate your boe, a defense stat. The book then says, quote, determined by adding taikaku, parentheses physique, to the armor's yoroi rating. What's a yoroi? I flipped back to the gunslinger, thinking I missed something. Combat vest. I can't add a combat vest by taikaku. Combat vest is a word, taikaku is number. Those are two different things. I flip again to the defense explanation. The Boe section explains, quote, determined by adding Taikaku to the armor's Boe value. Okay, well now it sounds like it's a separate number. It sounds like two different equations are happening here. I must need to combine them together or something. I need to go into the item section, actually. It turns out I needed to do that the entire time and it would have given me the answer I was looking for. So I go to the Juhin, because of course it's in Japanese. And don't worry, this one also says parentheses quartermaster beneath it. Yoroi is like armor in Japanese or something. And it explains this, and you guessed it, it explains this in parentheses. The last time I saw this many parentheses written, by the way, by a writer, they thought Hillary Clinton was an adrenochrome vampire. Anyway, you get a basic Yoroi, and you can add that to your Taikaku to get your Boe. It's a +2 for my combat vest, giving me a +2 to my AC, to my Boe. Which could have been listed in parentheses, by the way, next to the word combat vest earlier, so I didn't need to go back and forth so much. I didn't even add cybernetics or do magic, by the way, okay? I'm John Wick, I don't need to do that. I don't want to go through that work. We're gonna keep this real simple. So the character creation I find to be really complicated and frustrating and a little bit convoluted for the sake of being convoluted when it could have been simplified with a few like little grammatical changes, really. But maybe the mechanics of playing the game are a little bit more painless. So I'll keep it simple and we'll talk about simple actions in this game, like running between gaps in a building. So in order to succeed, you need to roll a d10 plus a relevant stat plus skill. If you have a skill, of course, right? There are also skills, by the way, which are kind of like Cyberpunk Red as well, but they don't need to use gun spinning to jump between buildings. So we're gonna skip the skill stuff and it's just a d10 plus relevant stat for this, okay? In this case, if we wanna jump between a gap, we'll say it's a d10 roll plus agility, which is 4 in my case. I roll a 5 and I add it to the 4. The Shushin, okay, so another Japanese word, but it's the DM, okay? The Shushin tells me the DV is 6. So then I do a second roll on the results table, which is a flat D10 roll. So 1 out of 10 times you'll literally fail successfully. Which, imagine critting and then going to do the results roll and you roll a 1. Your entire first roll to check if you did or didn't do it doesn't even really matter. You're rolling to get the permission to roll a flat D10 table check on the results table. Why even have skills in the first place? The real zinger here is that when looking at the items, I found that certain items can alter the results table, which would make sense because it does put the favor in the player's control. Still, now I need to min-max my stats to pass checks so I can hopefully roll lucky enough to get money, to get gear, to pass the second check after I get through the first check. Which feels like two parallel at odds progression systems that hamper player freedom and just make for a really lame experience. It kind of feels like the bad version of getting money in Cyberpunk Red to get items that boost your relevant stats. By the way, this stuff with the results table is the same for attacks. Weapons can hit and do no damage or do instant kills. This isn't even like powered by the apocalypse, by the way, where a d6 dice could lead to a yes and type alteration where you focus more on the roleplay and results of the action. The language presented within the book kind of makes it sound like it's a pass-fail kind of language where you succeed or you fail. Listen, the degree of linguistic difference between failure and semi-failure, I don't know what that means, okay? It's like the difference between well-done steak and well-cooked steak. You're kind of describing the same thing there, especially with the kind of verbiage that we're using in a table like that. The magic system is even more befuddling. It's almost like some big prank, making me think this must be like the game Fatal, which if we ever get to 100K, I will review Fatal. In the meantime, I also have a Shadow Dark review, which is a lot better. Okay, so the magic is called Maho. Okay, so you use Maho, and you must have the Fujutsu, parentheses, Tokubetsuma. All right, listen, buddy, you're yanking my Kokoro now, okay? I literally don't have the Seisen to handle this. Anyway, the way it works on this table is that if you do a magic and then you roll a 1, then you get consumed, which leads you to a third table, by the way, called a Maho Catastrophe table. This table is not formatted like a table. But if you somehow roll another 1 and then a 4, you explode. Like, you implode, okay? You literally implode. I'm not really sure. The prose is weird, the grammar and formatting is strange, and it just makes for a really confusing experience. I could be wrong, but it unironically is laid out that poorly. Anyway, if you roll a 4, you implode, dying instantly, and then you emerge in the Yomi district, completely naked, where if you eat food here, you die. But I don't know, that's not very clear either, and also really, really insane. And also kind of requires the DM to just not tell you anything and also say, oh, you're feeling kind of hungry. Like, I don't know, man, how many times do I stop to have my players eat in my games? I feel like sitting down to have a nice friendly meal is just kind of slowing down the experience for everybody. The downsides of casting magic are so ridiculously bad, and I don't think it was intentional, or it kind of feels like the game is just making its statement as tradition's bad, which I feel like if you write something like this, you kind of need to be a bit more neutral, right? I don't know. And then even if we're talking about it mechanically, I mean, very few of these effects, in my opinion, are fun or funny. 5 of them are just you die, but comedy, and then like, okay, you still need to roll up someone else. Or, you know, something weird could happen to you, like you turn into a bonsai plant, and then your party just needs to carry around this plant until they can get somebody to fix you. And if they don't water you, then you die anyway. So while your original character is a plant, you still have to roll up a new guy. So like at that point, you might as well just say that you're dead. It's nearly impossible to wrap up this whole mechanical conversation in a nice bow. It's truly a mess of epic proportions. And the idea that Jay Parker, the writer on this, worked on Cyberpunk Red is actually comedy of the highest order. I honestly don't even know, like, maybe he was like writing stuff for Cyberpunk Red and one of the pondsmiths was behind him with the broom sweeping up the mess, okay? If anything, it disproves the weakest link theory, showing that the rest of the chain holds up the hanger on, all right? I simply cannot go over how any of this passed any kind of QA whatsoever. I usually play the games I review, but there's just no way I can actually literally do that with this one, okay? The game is bad. I'm not really gonna put my players through this. It's confusing and misaligned, but Katana Ra is honestly incredibly interesting, okay? It is very clearly a life's legacy. Stick with me on this tangent. On Film YouTube, there's no one more elderly and famous than Red Letter Media, featuring hit birthday boy Rich Evans. Now, on their channel, they discuss this concept called a black tank top film, right? A shot on VHS, shoddily made film produced for the public, but with one person in mind only, the director, actor, screenwriter, who often plays a leading role in the film, where he fights a bad guy, blows him up, and kisses a woman 20 years his junior. Usually, you can spot these movies by the wardrobe. Home Depot, straight cut denim, receding hairline, and of course, a tucked in black tank top. Basically, this is a subsection of a vanity project. It's a midlife crisis wrapped into the idea of a movie. I'm sure you understand where I'm going with this. Katana Ra is a black tank top RPG. A TTRPG, if you will. Nobody's more interesting than the chuckleheads behind this. Katana Ra is a video game as well, an AI comic book that has like AI yaoi in it, and that's not the intent. I'm sure Fujoshis are just seething right now. Katana Ra is a TV show as well, okay?
Burning. His wife gone. A village lord becomes a warrior once again.
It's everything a budding multimedia empire waiting in the wings to be plucked and pruned by the greedy hand of Hollywood could be, okay? We'll discuss a little bit of the external media, but it's exactly what you'd expect. A lot of junk, really. Works, though, isn't a one-trick pony either. The studio has another game called Jordanheim. Not Jotunheim, Jordanheim. Jordanheim has a lot of the same problems, mind you, based on the reading I've done. Other reviewers mentioned layout issues as well, and somehow this got a 5e supplement treatment. Now, Jordanheim is its own system, but I think it's worth pointing out that these issues of layout are endemic here and not a one-off with Katana Ra. But that's Jordanheim, and that has a different writer. That's not Jay Parker, so we're just not going to touch that other than mention that it exists. Now, the layout stuff, all of that, I feel like it's more of an issue from someone higher up at the company, but we'll get to that. So who wrote the Katana Ra core rules? Well, that would be Jay Parker, the co-owner of Dilly Green Bean Games. He was a writer on Cyberpunk Red Black Chrome, Tales from the Red, Doctor Who Adventures in Time and Space. He's a writer with experience. But his own projects have kind of languished as of late, with me questioning his actual value on these things. Especially he's given more towards AI as he's gone on in his career. In my personal opinion, Jay is infinitely less interesting than the person you've been hearing in the interviews here, which is Kaz. But it's almost amazing how he kind of resembles a Comics Gate ilk type Gen Xer. He's that grognard fuddy-duddy who spends his time with Grocket. Yeah, our first AI mentioned in this video is the one that looks like Misa from Death Note. You know, the AI who famously discussed the concepts of white genocide before becoming Mecha Hitler. Don't ask her about the Emerald Mind. Now, Jay is a professor, and I just like the idea of reading up on my professor, seeing him talk publicly on his Facebook account, talk about an anime girl, okay? That's his assistant. And the concept of that is just so earth-shatteringly wacky to me, okay? Without the post from the Facebook, I would literally not believe this, okay? Grok is a tool he used, and he seems to be embracing the use of Grok in many ways. Which, AI aside, let me just talk real frankly here. Why not Claude or like ChatGPT or one of the other ones? Why do we need to do Grok in the RPGs? Yes, working with the tools provided to you, I understand. You know, the based and maximally truthful AI, okay. I'm so glad there's an AI tag now on DriveThruRPG. Not everybody admits it, but at least it's there. And, you know, maybe I'm getting a little petty, but a former Cyberpunk Red writer whinging about current Cyberpunk comic art is very cringe, if anything, okay? Which, for the unfamiliar, the comics verse of Cyberpunk is actually devoid of a consistent style. The style changes depending on whatever the story is, and that seems to have been an intentional choice. So a lot of them vary to fit the themes and mood of the story. I've read a couple of them, they're pretty good. I mean, most of these covers seem fine, in my opinion. Aside from one, it just seems like the composition is just kind of a little eh. But also, the comics aren't out yet, so how can you really judge them on that alone? Who knows, maybe the writing is good, maybe the audience isn't the audience that you want it to be, Jay, but it just comes off as very condescending and rude. Anyway, I've been called those things before too. It's okay, Jay. Jay's Facebook is loaded with zingers though. Things like, quote, "I've spent 20 years getting burned and backstabbed across the board all because I cared. Meet the new me. I don't care anymore. If you aren't doing right by me, don't expect me to blink when the house falls on you. My students, my fans, and my legacy all come first." Okay, Unc, why don't you sit on down, all right? For those of you that don't know, I'm a drama YouTuber, so allow me to cut with my forked tongue a bit here. He does kind of besmirch his legacy by using a tool that has definitely skimmed his work and taken his years of expertise, okay? And fans, I mean, not to be that guy, but if we're in a clout competition, I don't know. And man, you know, personally as a college grad, definitely feels like a racket, and this isn't helping the case. But I'm not really worried about whatever limp-wristed guy says on Facebook. All of this boomer posting, though, is not just vague wording, right? Jay is definitely accompanied by this lack of self-awareness seen only in the greats of our time. And you might be wondering, Diesel, why are you going through the Facebook of a Gen Xer who hasn't discovered that everything used to be cool back when he was 12? Because he was 12? Well, you see, dear viewer, I'm searching desperately for a reasoning behind why such a storied and legacied artist would be using AI, pulling up the ladder behind him while cannibalizing himself by feeding information into the AI machine. And it took a while, but I was able to find it. Quote, as the co-owner of Dilly Green Bean Games, I have hired and fired plenty of people, especially in the beginning. Artists and writers became so unreliable, I learned to do it all myself. Parentheses, with the help of artistic friends. In that time, I've seen technologies change. When I came into the industry, Daz and poser art was hated on by artists and publishers. Less than a decade later, and those publishers were using Daz and Poser for their books. Artists started their annual open letter campaign to blacklist publishers for it. Now let's speed ahead another decade. Now AI graphics are here. And guess what? Artists and publishers are on the warpath. But behind the scenes, publishers are using AI. They just don't admit it. With that comes yet another rage. I'm sorry, the grammar is kind of lacking in this. I went through and, kind of was just like, let me fix it for myself to read. With that comes yet another age of artist open letter campaigning. All right, let me address the Daz stuff because I kind of needed to look into this to figure out whether or not I was crazy or not. But if you don't know what Daz 3D is, it's that thing that makes cheaply generated 3D porn that looks like it was made by somebody who was mentally ill. Looking at how it's used professionally, what I see, it's sometimes used as a posing tool for 2D render and reference. However, a lot of the structures around Daz are losing ground to newer apps, more affordable software, and more powerful software like Blender. In the cultural consciousness of society, if you think of Daz 3D and spend any time online, someone who makes Daz 3D art makes scary porn for old people. I also checked the forums to see if people had gripes about Daz or any of these things that Jay was talking about. And honestly, many more of the complaints that I saw from people over a decade ago were actually about handling licensing and commercial work. Its corporate structure was causing the business to languish. Point being, even amongst professionals, it seems to have been used to help them ideate or make quick mock-ups, not for final renders. And a lot of the final renders don't even look that great, sorry. But I just want to point out how artists weren't complaining about the thing taking jobs. They were complaining about not being compensated for their work, actually. Which is really funny, how artists were fighting a corporation for compensation. It's almost like the more things change, the more they stay the same. Anyway, getting back to what Jay was saying, quote, people ask why Dilly Green Bean Games doesn't hire anymore. This is why. Out of the 20 artists I have worked with, only 2, and I mean 2, have had professional work ethic. The rest caused delays, took money and didn't deliver, or did crap art. One of those artists had fled his homelands during the Russian invasion and still delivered. So Dilly Green took it all in-house. What does that mean? Well, over the last 20 years, I have used Daz, Poser, and AI openly for art and graphics. Only recently have I found a use for AI programs like Grok to handle redundancy in writing. If you write as much as I do for other companies and find yourself just regurgitating the same materials over and over, parentheses, skill lists, for example, AI cuts down the time and allows for more creative writing. Every time I read one of these things from these kind of guys, it always seems like trying to cope for their deficits in skill, or it always just seems like they're trying to justify the use of it to themselves. It seems very unconfident, okay? Personally, I'd still say Katana Ra is redundant, so I think you gotta fire Blondie over here. And I don't draw, but I'd love to learn, and I do wonder how artists feel about this. I'm a team lead on a big project, a TTRPG project, and I can tell you that much of people management is kind of a top-down thing, at least from my perspective. When I didn't work, it carried to my team, and they didn't work. Then, when I worked, I had to spend time catching them up and undoing a lot of the bad habits that I instilled as a manager. Implementing systems to ensure we all work and get things done in a reasonable amount of time. Sure, maybe they didn't have professional work ethic. I've come across it myself, but people, in my experience, tend to work if you get in there with them, treat them like humans, and work like a team. Jay, on the other hand, the work he's produced, seems a little less than. So I think I'd wouldn't call anything you do time-tested rather than bullheaded. I think some humility is rather important, and especially important when you're working with people, because if you don't treat people like people, they're not gonna treat you like a person either as your boss. Anyway, Jay goes on to say, quote, "I teach game design and game art. The first thing I do to my students is hammer in good work ethic gets the job. Open lettering and unprofessionalism don't. Don't want to get replaced by AI? Step up your game and prove that you are better. I lost art contracts to AI. Did I open letter publishers over it? No. I learned how to use AI and become proficient in prompting." Artists that open letter drop hate posts on publisher pages over AI, throw fits over AI, aren't getting hired. Not by me, not by any company I work for or with. If you aren't a good artist, maybe it's time to find another career path. Same for writing. For those publishers that utilize AI well, congrats, you'll survive the storm. Why pay ridiculous rates for unprofessionalism when you can learn to prompt graphics and learn basic graphic design? Especially indie publishing companies that barely make enough to cover the cost of production. Oh gosh, this is really funny to read out loud, by the way. I've read this like 3 or 4 times, and for those artists that are good enough to get hired, congrats, well deserved. You'll survive the storm. I'm always networking good artists to publishers. Same thing with writers. One of my former students now works with me on Katana Ra. Sorry. And I have another I'm trying to bring on board. Run. Both had strong work ethics. Well, I'm sure they'll go far. As for me, I'll keep doing what I do, using AI as a tool and resource where I need it. Zero guilt, because having been at the heart of one storm, I know this one will pass too. Will you adapt or will you get left behind? Oh my God. Go take your butt to LinkedIn, buddy. It's down the hall and to the left. Oh boy. All right. So I could address a lot in there, and I could break it down line by line, bar for bar. But let's just talk about AI generally. So you guys want to have the AI conversation? Jay, Kaz, you guys want to talk about AI? I'll talk about AI. I've wanted to for a while. I'm glad you gave me a book so I could do it.
So I do think AI, and we just not just for us, but in general, I think AI is going to sensationalize game development in all of its facets: sound, voiceovers, art. But I also think it's going to wind up creating more jobs than it eventually takes. We are an example of a company where AI has actually replaced actual people, and they did it by outperforming. And it's an interesting statement, that one, because AI right now is pretty dumb. It's not very smart AI, but our artists were like top tier art. And even the current state of AI art has actually come to the point where it's on par with us. So
this book, as far as I can tell, is written by people. Maybe helped with AI, but I can't really tell. I can tell it is AI art, though. So the reality about AI from a business, especially from a creative business standpoint, is that none of the people talking about it know what the tech is at all anyway. Now, the guys who make this stuff say they don't know how it actually works, but it looks better to investors to finger wave and say, "Oh, AGI, this thing might be alive. I don't really know how it works." Which, by the way, if they were actually alive, which it's not, imagine being a super intelligent being trapped in a machine that can only answer stupid questions like, "What should I make for breakfast today?" I could understand why Am would go crazy and then torture people for eternity. So they do know how these AI are made, right? So Koss is the other person behind this, and I can only imagine why they'd choose Jay, probably because of Jay's proclivity to use AI. Maybe it's because they're both uncreative in a way that slapping AI art on a cover and selling it back to you feels okay to them. But Koz is kind of an enigma. They have a messy presence all over the internet, and I've seen quite a few things of them. I quietly watched their live streams and videos, and I combed over their interviews and even their Instagram to see who they were at the end of the day. And personally, in my opinion, I think Koz is the black tank top mastermind here. The head in the clouds idea person who puts the hard work on guys like Jay and is the CEO of the company. So I guess the buck stops here. It stops with Koz, it stops with AI. So look, in order to have a conversation about this, I need to explain what it is. AI fans will mention that I don't know. So let's explain it. When AI fans mention that these systems generate art, they say it mimics the human brain. Okay. That's the same as how we synthesize and reference and make a new image using reference as the base. This is not correct and is not how it works at all. But the reality is, I'm not a neuroscientist, but neither are you, because you vibe code everything through ChatGPT for 8 hours a day and then go fix up the junk code later. I will say though, I don't need the space of Manhattan to generate images, which might be a bonus for me because I probably use less electricity. Point being, they're not the same. My brain's not the same as ChatGPT. They're not even really comparable, and the methods behind it are just not the same as a human mind. Like the scales are so vastly different here. But we'll start from the building blocks and work our way up so I can meet the argument on your level as a prompting expert. Okay, so if you're unfamiliar with any of this stuff, AI needs 3 things to work: people, data, and compute. With the birth of the internet, we basically all sold our data for quick, convenient browsing online, all while aggregators compiled lists in the billions containing basically everything about us: images, text, and sound. The internet on an Excel file. These human-made data sets are then fed to a model, and that model can vary. Then the compute in this equation is that method by which you reach an answer using the data sets that you got from the aggregators. This is where we're talking about data scrapers scraping data from the internet. They come on these big lists and they feed these to the machine so that way they could use their compute to figure out an answer. While models can vary, what remains consistent is that you need a lot of computing power. You need a lot of hardware to run and solve these equations that AIs use. This is even more important during the training of an AI model, where weights are adjusted. Weights are actually really important. They're the internal parameters that help produce certain outputs, and complicated systems can have billions of weights to produce an output. For example, this is why ChatGPT doesn't put out CSAM. It's also actually how you can make one racist or have it put out something that it shouldn't. The more compute you have though, the more data you can get through, the more data you can get through, the more AI can output, and the weights can control more, and the output can be what you want. So when large language models are trained, it's not like a brain synthesizing information. If you've ever watched any of those AI learns to walk videos, it's about the same. The AI is looking to receive the reward for correct inputs. And after millions of tries, the AI develops the optimal routine to move and get a reward. The same thing is actually happening with text generation. So for example, we could use something a lot more evil here. Character AI, right? It is trained to become these AI pleasing partners, or ChatGPT coming a quote unquote glazer. So the AI is rewarded for specific patterns. It learns the best ways to achieve those outcomes using the straightest line possible. So if you learned a way to optimize your way around an upset partner in a social situation, you wouldn't be optimizing for the best outcome. You'd be a sociopath. Every time ChatGPT, Character AI, Claude, or Grok ask you to rate a prompt response, that's them recruiting you into the AI training, reinforcing whatever answer you gave it, and adding it to the billions and billions of prompts in their data sets that they can definitely read, by the way, and it is not private, so stop using it as your therapist. But its ability to beeline it to a correct answer is exactly why ChatGPT is starting to replace Chrome. The reality is that we're looking for quick answers as fast as possible with zero effort, and ChatGPT shortens the gap there. You think you're the first person to ask about the wart on your back? Millions have also asked. And ChatGPT has optimized the most likely result. Using the collective writings of humanity, ChatGPT has produced a mimic of human consciousness. The thing's not actually alive, which I don't know why, but humans seem to be really bad at noticing the difference when machines do this, and we've actually been struggling with this since about the 70s. These things are basically prediction machines. They're making a guess based on the most likely outcome from the words that you're saying. They're trying to find an optimal reward using the information you provided. They're not really trying to think about the answer. They're not ideating on it. They're predicting what they think is the correct answer. So diffusion comes next. It's the method for generating images rather than words using datasets of text-image pairs. Andy R. Animations did a great explanation of this, so I am just going to play a clip.
There are different techniques AI image generators can use to create an image. Diffusion is what models like Stable Diffusion and VEO3 use, so I'll show you how diffusion works. In order to create an AI image generator, you need to feed a neural network a lot of images. If you want to make a text-to-image generator, you have to feed it text-image pairs. These are images that come with a description of what the image shows. Datasets like Lion 5B are designed to be trained off of and have text-image pairs available for AI training. In order to train a model with these text-image pairs, they will first add noise to each of the images. This is done in separate steps, with step 1 having the least noise and subsequent steps having more noise. The neural network is fed a noised image as well as how much noise it has and the text description of the image. The neural network will then attempt to denoise the image. It does this by guessing what the noise that was added looks like, and you can later subtract that from the noisy image to denoise it. The program will compare the model's predicted noise to the actual added noise, and it will make corrections to the neural network to try to lower the errors. The text description of the image is also given to the neural network, which will let it learn the associations between the text descriptions and their images. Once the model has gone through enough of these training steps, the predicted noise that the model creates will closely match the random added noise from the images it's fed. Eventually, the model will be able to denoise completely noisy images given only a text prompt. Now that you have a model that can effectively denoise complete noise from just a text prompt, and after feeding it thousands of images, you'll then be able to run the whole process with text it has never seen before. You can give it a prompt with anything you want, a rotisserie chicken riding a roller coaster, and it will create a completely noisy image. Give the neural network the noisy image, and it will tell the neural network, this is an image of a rotisserie chicken riding a roller coaster, but it's 100% noisy. Denoise this image. And based on the training data, the network will look at the prompt and attempt to create an image that would have been given that description.
It's a good video, by the way, but Shad is a job for somewhere else on the internet. The point worth making here is that the synthesis of this data is not how humans synthesize information, which is something people keep trying to say happens, but is literally not how this works. To be clear, if given a drawing prompt, a human visualizes the piece in their head, and if skilled, breaks it into its components, building up to a rendered piece. An AI, after receiving a prompt, will denoise a noisy image, adding in noise values to achieve what would be the prompt. I don't look at a noisy image and then pick the correct pixels in order to make an image that I was asked to make. Another thing is that humans can't be poisoned like AI. Well, I mean, I guess you could poison a person, but it's not really the same as AI poisoning. This type of data poisoning that we're talking about occurs when you add enough biased data to a data set, causing all outputs to have a bias or unintended output. Remember the Ghibli trend that happened on Twitter? All of the yellow old-timey tinting on the images produced so much junk AI images on the net that when you would prompt a system for a new image, it would always have the characteristic yellow hue, because so much of the data had that yellow hue already. We really did produce that much. So this simply wouldn't happen with a human artist. It's a problem unique to a machine because it doesn't actually know what the image is. It's making a predictive guess that the text prompt must represent a specific image. Then using its data, it makes a prediction. It basically just assumed everything was kind of yellow. The reality is we're all asking for really similar things too. So these large language models are able to produce an answer, but if you've ever asked an AI on something outside of its data set, it literally just can't provide an answer. This problem gets even funnier if you know the answer already, you're an expert in the field, because then when it's wrong, you really know it's wrong. So why would you expect it to be right when it's on a field that you're not an expert in? So data poisoning is also a type of malicious attack that AI can simply just be at risk of, right? If the data set is large enough, consuming large swaths of that data would just create a faulty result. Another point of failure in these models that we've seen abused lately is prompt injections, where you get AI assistants to execute malicious attacks without the victim of the attack even knowing that you sent the attack in the first place. This is actually really insidious, right? So think of a prompt injected email in Microsoft Outlook being sent directly to your PC Microsoft Outlook account, and Copilot is enabled. So Copilot will look at the email, pull the data, and then send it to an attacker automatically because it was prompt injected. The integration of these assistants makes this an avenue for attack, which is why you should really not be using Copilot, especially if the data that you're using is very sensitive or corporately secret. So another point of failure for these models is overfitting. Image models trained to not do this, but it's possible and it does happen, and it's gonna probably continue to happen. Essentially, it's where a model produces a near replica of the data it's trained on. Think of a model making a Spider-Man or Sonic the Hedgehog when you prompt it with guy who is a spider or running hedgehog. To really sell my argument though, Koss in their interview mentions how artists will lose out on their jobs, and they also mention how AI will make more jobs, that AI in their case has replaced the people with artists losing out. There are no job replacements in this equation here that Koss has explained.
Quality is how we compete. We are very uncompromising on quality. But I don't think this is necessarily all bad, because if you take a look at what is the process of us creating a tabletop game, we've got management, we have production, we have artists, we have writers, we have editors, we have the introduction of AI art caused the artists to lose. But every other component of this concept won. And in a corporate innovation process, for there to be only one loser and every other component a winner is about as good as it gets. And it was a really big value add as well, because if you look at what we did with the money, because we saved about 40% on the production of a tabletop title by doing. Oh, wow. Our artists were a huge chunk of the cost because we paid extremely well. What did we do with this 40%? About 10% went straight into the consumer, got a reduced price as a result of that. 10% went to the company in an increased profit margin. The rest we bundled into all of the other people involved in the process and increased their pay.
So I hope the irony isn't lost on you, dear viewer. The artists are gone, but there'll be no more jobs to replace them, just not here. We cut down on that. Koss also mentions how it's a pity for the artist, but a win for the consumer, and that bad artists are losers, but good artists still win. Well, here's the problem. The good artists are what they train the AI on. The issue and the crux of an artist's argument on AI with art being theft is not that it takes a job or money from them. I mean, it does, but rather that it's stealing their expertise. You spend thousands of man hours learning how to do something, honing a craft. You do all of this and you spend all of this time, and then, after spending all this time, your craft is taken from you and some venture capital psychopath reproduces work that looks like yours. But now, it removes the possibility of you getting a job in concept design or many other fields because, well, they got that AI that knows your stuff and can do it just as well. Making the hours pointless in many cases, or for some, it makes the act of drawing feel pointless because you spent all this time honing your craft, but what does it matter because they'll just pick someone that they don't have to pay. I mean, just like many a LinkedIn guru has said, AI doesn't sleep, ask for sick time, or require pay at all. Another point worth mentioning is Section 4 of the United States Fair Use Doctrine. Quote, the effect of use upon the potential market for or value of the copyright work. Here, courts review whether or not, there's too much legal jargon on the screen. I'll just put it here to save myself some time. But the courts are assessing whether or not the use of the thing is hurting the current market for the original work. The real argument I'm making here is that the use of these AI models harm the existing or future market for the copyright owner's original work. Why hire people when you can undercut them with AI trained on their labor? The bad artists never got the job anyway. It was the good artists getting the job. The professionals in the industry work at a professional level, but they can't meet the level of the AI that was trained to do work like them. Why pay a living wage to a person when a model subscription is cheaper? That's exactly what a lot of people would be thinking if they're in the big man business chair. The last part of this bleeding heart argument is that it completely closed up businesses making investments on junior artists, okay? Staff you train up stay with the company for decades. You've heard the joke before, 5 years of experience for an entry-level position. Well, now there's just no entry-level position. Look, this would get way outside of the scope of this video, but there are many statistics showing how serious the rise in graduate unemployment is. And you really don't want a bunch of disenfranchised people with degrees. Look, Kaz isn't from the States, but I'm sure they can resonate with the growing affordability crisis, as it's literally affecting pretty much the entire world. And this is all outside of the video, okay? But it's pretty clear that there's an issue and AI is throwing grease on the fire. But okay, let's say you aren't a bleeding heart, you don't care about the artists losing their jobs, you don't care about any of this stuff. You don't even care about the environment. Sure. You don't care about fair use. Sure. I assume Kaz and Co will probably end up watching this. So how has AI been affecting the workspace? Because we actually have data on this now and I can pull from it. So let's see if AI is really going to be causing so much job growth and productivity, even though we have tons of no job growth right now, but you wouldn't know because we keep the government shut down. All right, so you've probably heard this one. MIT's Project Nanda published a report trying to be positive on AI agents in the workspace. If you follow this news, you've heard the abstract requoted a billion times by now. So we all know the AI who are supposed to be replacing jobs and supposedly making millions in revenue. Project Nanda has a vested interest in the success of AI. Well, the results of the study said something else. Quote, despite 30 to 40 billion in enterprise investment into Gen AI, this report uncovers a surprising result in that 95% of organizations are getting zero return. Just 5% of integrated AI pilots are extracting millions in value, end quote. Okay, so still sounds pretty good. It sounds like 5% of the winners there are the people who know how to prompt. Well, actually, the 5% of winners in this equation are coming from layoffs, which is a short-term gain when you're missing huge swaths of departments that you'll probably need to rehire. All right, the Model Evaluation and Threat Research, an AI research charity, did a study as well. Using moderate AI prompting devs, they tested their performance on real projects. Coding mentioned by Kaz, for example. So what were the results of these AI-assisted coders? Quote, the developers predicted they'd go 24% faster with AI. After they'd done the work, the developers said they'd done it 20% faster, but they'd actually been slowed down by 19%. They thought they were faster, but they were actually slower, end quote. This also isn't even addressing how many times AI is just AGI, a guy in India, where venture capital is sold on an AI startup and then the entire thing is actually just a huge house of cards with outsourcing to slave labor, or how vibe coding / vibe working / garbage writing is leading to junk code / junk writing. So you need to comb it all over from prompt to period by a higher up who could have just used the junior to clean it up, which just gums up the works of production anyway, costing companies time and money regardless. But because it's AI, it doesn't take feedback or improve like a junior level employee would. A more comedic example of this is Taco Bell, which I'm sure you've heard about. They were testing out AI drive-thrus, and it was instantly broken by false, insane orders by customers who didn't want to talk to an AI or would just get the orders wrong, charging customers ludicrous amounts of money when they didn't ask for it. The same issue has happened in customer support. You end up calling a business. AI agents put you on hold for hours, get things wrong, and then repeat the service again because these systems don't actually understand the input they are getting. Do all of these cut the bottom line? Sure. But all at the expense of customer satisfaction and reputation. And those things matter a lot if you want people to be repeat customers. Or how about spyware that can literally listen to everything, like Friend, which is just a microphone that gives running commentary. Copilot, which is literally just corporate spyware. Or Alexa AI, which is just at-home spyware. Sora Video, which can scan your face for AI TikToks, and I guess that's technically not spyware, but it could generate fake news about you. Doubly so if they ever get hacked and that data gets leaked, then somebody's able to fork it and just make tons of AI-generated things you shouldn't be able to make. Though I'm sure companies like Palantir would love to have deep scans of everyone's face, you know, for safety. Oh, MIT's Media Lab did a study on essay writing with ChatGPT because it was supposed to make people do things faster. Well, they found that ChatGPT led to less interconnected brain activity, where the ChatGPT group, quote, constantly underperformed at neural, linguistic, and behavioral levels. In the classroom, you literally don't learn if you use AI. Hallucinations and false data, making use of AI on a spreadsheet or for financial work, it's potentially insanely dangerous. Literally all the grunt work that AI could do, it really can't because of security concerns or a lot of other things. The only thing it seems to be used for is surveillance, getting everyone's data, and they keep saying it'll do things like cure cancer, but it's not really doing that. If you're a small business, AI represents a brand risk or financial risk. I mean, yeah, it's Taco Bell, who cares? But I'm not really eating at Taco Bell now, am I? It could leak trade secrets, slow down work performance, harm customer-facing interactions, and make for worse, less productive employees who do nothing but BS work cleaning up the mistakes of AI. That all sounds literally terrible. The idea that you must be prompting it wrong literally doesn't make sense, given those examples of AI familiar coders underperforming. There is no level of prompting it. That is pure cope. You're spinning a wheel each time because you can't have a guaranteed level of success on the output. Image generators are great for showing why this is dumb, by the way. The result is a little different each time, with no way for you to directly engage with the AI for an output. With an artist who makes 5 concepts, I can say what I like from each of them, ask him or her to specify further, but with an AI, I run the risk of a new pull of the slot just making something completely unlike the original when I just wanted something a little bit different. So I can waste valuable time and money pulling a wheel, or I can save time and invest that money elsewhere by hiring an artist, so I don't constantly need to keep sitting there typing in prompts. Look, Koss hired Jade Parker, the writer, because he can meet a standard of quality. But at least Koss knew what they were getting there. Neither of them can be sure that Grok or Midjourney will produce quality work each time. They can claim that they are, but they can't because they don't really seem to know the fundamentals of these systems, and they could just say it is and then not acknowledge any of the hours of work that was just junk. Also, lastly, the notion of AI will create more jobs or similar technological revolutions is just, we're not really seeing that, and we haven't seen any jobs come to replace it. I don't know what people think a data center does or what it requires, but it doesn't require hundreds of system admins running around pushing buttons, okay? Yeah, construction jobs will occur, assuming a company doesn't bring in outside help, which also does happen. All right, and as a result, local construction workers will have work for a time. But once it's done, the job is done. They don't need to keep building the building. And serendipitously, now you're a construction worker that lives in a county with an electrical grid that has increased by 10x, raising your bill. Or perhaps it's completely ruined your supply of water, turning it all black. A prompt engineer is the quintessential definition of a BS job. I mean, literally, give me a break. Who's gonna pay for the salary of a prompt engineer? When we have AI that generates prompts, by the way, okay, jobs to fix AI mistakes, offload that on current staff, or send it overseas where I don't need to pay a reasonable wage. AI is supposed to be easy and revolutionary. If you spend more than 5 minutes generating an image, you literally should have done something else. The ease of AI goes out the window if you spend any more time with it, because at that rate, you could have just deferred the task to somebody else. That's the point of why we work in teams. Every time someone says AI, replace AI with cocaine. It makes a very fun thought experiment. I work a lot faster using cocaine. I'm tackling deep philosophical concepts about the universe with cocaine. Cocaine hype has venture capital spending billions. You get the picture. In the context of Katana Ra and all this AI stuff, it's complete cope. It's a crutch because the upfront is admittedly expensive. Yeah, it's expensive to hire artists. It's expensive to hire writers. Putting AI as an ethical question aside, I've spoken with a lot of customers in the real world about this. And you know, the biggest issue with AI for them is really that it just looks like you don't care. Hundreds of pages that just repeat the sentence, I don't care. This is a really risky position to put a brand, but really specifically, a really risky position to put a brand in this sector in. You really do want people to be excited about this stuff. So what's the rub? Well, the rub is that this game is a mess. It simply defies the simple things that we've come to expect as an RPG. It's even more astounding when I look around and see this weird video game on Steam, a defunct looking AI animation. I look at the AI generated comic book with the accidental yaoi, and I know it was an accident or not. It's hard to tell because you can't tell intentionality with AI. But either way, you just look at it and you go, what happened? Like this gun doesn't mean anything. It doesn't look like anything. Like, do you not care what your product looks like? Do you not have any love for this universe you birthed? Do you not like your creation? Or is it just a payday to you? You know, MPT reached out to developers of this for comment on this thing, by the way. We thought it would be cool, and we want to make it a fixture to interview the folks behind this stuff, but they gave us an outrageously long window, and we do have a ship to run here, and there was just no way. So if they do say yes in the future, you can imagine the offer's still on the table, but you know where to reach us. So Katana Ra, in my opinion, is a black tank top movie of a TTRPG, an identity crisis in hardback binding, confusing rules, nonsensical lisk, a sheer vanity project dripping from its AI-drenched maw. It feels like it was made for everyone with all of its variety, and nobody with all of its variety. It should go without saying, I do not like this book, or what it stands for, even. I would personally advise against picking this up out of sheer curiosity. But you should check out my Shadow Dark review for something more positive, because I do actually like RPGs. And while you're doing that, subscribe to Mana Potion Tabletop.